Hello friends, today we are going to discuss the topic of leakage flux and leakage reactance of three-phase induction motor. When three-phase AC supply is given to the stator of three-phase induction motor, magnetic flux is set up in the magnetic circuit. This magnetic circuit comprises of stator core, stator teeth, air gap, rotor teeth, rotor core, and then the magnetic path is completed. This flux is known as the useful flux. Besides this useful flux, some flux sets up in the path which it is not intended to. That is known as the leakage flux. So what are the components of this leakage flux? The leakage flux basically are flux set up in the slot, hence known as slot leakage, tooth top leakage, zigzag leakage, and overhang leakage. Slot leakage. The flux which is sets up in the slot of either the stator or the rotor is known as the slot leakage flux. This flux does not take part in the energy conversion, but is rather flux which is set up in the path which it is not intended to. This slot leakage flux depends upon the shape of the slot. Here I have shown the open type of slot, so the flux will be set up in this particular way, where this is the conductor which is setting up the flux. This path is known as a tooth. So a slot is placed between the two tooths. The conductor is setting up the flux, and this flux is a slot leakage flux. It also depends upon the arrangement of the conductor in the slot. Many of the times we use double layer winding, so the flux in that case, leakage flux, will be larger. Leakage reactance excess is thus given by 8 pi f Tp h square L lambda s by Qp. The tooth top leakage flux, the flux which sets up between the tooth top is known as the tooth top leakage flux. This flux depends upon the length of the air gap. It depends upon the shape of the tooth formed by the slot. So hence this also depends upon the shape of the slot. This here is shown a semi-enclosed slot. So here we can observe that the tooth top at the upper part is larger, whereas at the lower end it is smaller. So this flux which sets up between the tooth is known as the tooth top leakage flux, and it is given by this empirical formula. Here we are considering the lambda t is the length of the path for the leakage flux. Zigzag flux is the flux which sets up between the opposite tooth, that is one rotor tooth, the next tooth will be the stator, then rotor, and so on over the complete periphery. It is in the formation of zigzag, hence it is known as the zigzag leakage. It depends upon again the air gap. It also depends upon the width of the tooth. So it basically it increases the length of the zigzags. Hence the reactance is given by this empirical formula. The last one is the overhang flux. The inactive path of the conductor of the three-phase induction motor is basically known as the overhang. The flux set up around this conductor, which is not taking part in the energy conversion, but it is only completing the magnetic current path through the overhang, is known as the overhang leakage flux. It leads to overhang leakage reactance, which depends upon the length of the overhang. It also depends upon its geometry, that is of course D and L, D square L output equation, we have discussed that. The overhang also are on both the sides. Here even if it is shown as one side, but it generally occurs on the both sides because the overhang lies on the both sides of the stator as well as the rotor. So we are only considering here now the stator, assuming that the rotor is a squirrel cage rotor. So we get the overhang leakage reactance. So the total reactance of the three-phase induction motor is the sum of the slot leakage reactance, tooth top leakage reactance, zigzag leakage reactance, and the overhang leakage reactance. Thank you. Please like, share and subscribe this video.